Hi again then guys, and welcome to another Rivals match on Gran Turismo Sport, and this time we are running a suggested rivalry actually between the original, or kind of the original, and the newer version, the successor of the original, the Mercedes SLS GT3 car, and then the newer Mercedes AMG GT GT3 car. So how do they compare? Of course they're very similar, they're both GT style exotics. So how do they measure up to each other, really, as race cars? Well, as always, we'll break down each vehicle individually, compare their lap times, and then, using top trump style methodology, we'll give the car with the better numbers points, and then tabulate those points together and see how they fall. So, first up, let's consider the OG, the Mercedes SLS GT3. Well, the SLS GT3 is probably the main reason, I would say, why this rivalry actually matters, because this car is already so good on Gran Turismo 6, and it's such a fan favourite, and it's not difficult to see why. It's one of the quickest GT cars in the game, not just around a track or around corners, but even just for pure straight line speed. It's pretty much quicker than the road-going version, which sounds like an obvious thing to say, but that's actually rare for Gran Turismo's race cars to be quicker than the road-going version when it comes to top-end speed. Now on GT Sport, the top speed is, so far, significantly lower. So how does it compare in every other way? Is it as good as it already is on GT6? Has it been leveled out more? Or maybe is it even better? Well, I would say overall, it's as good as it was before in its base form. It's very hard to tell what its upper abilities are, because of course on GT6, you could quite easily tune this thing up to around 1,000 horsepower, about 989. I believe it was. That's a huge amount of power for a GT car to have. So of course the performance characteristics change drastically on that game, whereas on this one you just don't have that kind of capabilities. You're running less than 600 horsepower in the beta, and the beta is the only point of reference that we have. So it might end up having more power. Of course, with balance of performance you're looking at almost 800, as with any other car, but it'll be interesting to see if it has a similar kind of straight line advantage that it had on GT6. As far as cornering, acceleration, all-round ability goes, again, I would say it's about as good as it was before. Interestingly, although in many ways the specs don't seem as impressive as the newer AMG GT, it was the quicker of the two around this track. And not just this track either, it can be quicker on other tracks as well, which just goes to show how great the SLS still is, and that definitely bodes well for the full game. Those who already love the SLS definitely won't be disappointed. It's without a doubt one of the stronger Group 3 cars. What though about the newer version, the successor, the car which has arguably more to live up to because of how good this one is, the AMG GT3? Well, the AMG GT3, as I said, at least for me personally, has a huge amount to live up to because of how good the SLS already is, and one of the best ways of jumping into the scene, into the fray if you will, and setting yourself apart as being the bigger, newer, bolder option is to have better on-paper numbers. Now, although that doesn't always equate into better performance, as I said, the SLS was still quicker, it is good for getting public opinion, or at least favour, on your side. And if you can win the crowd, although it won't necessarily win you a race, it can certainly help the morale of a team or of a driver, and of course with Gran Turismo Sport's focus on that kind of thing, that could help. People loving the car does help the driver sometimes to drive it better. I'm speaking from personal experience that if I love a car, I definitely drive it more quickly and have more ability with it because of my love for that car than a car which I don't love as much, but which may still be a good car for everyone else. This car definitely has the stronger numbers. It's lighter, more powerful, and a variety of other things, but it wasn't good enough to make it quicker, at least not for me. In a straight line it definitely is, but of course on most tracks you need that mix of not just straight line speed, top speed or acceleration, but handling too. And when you factor that in, it's not that this is a bad car. I would say that this is in fact a very good one. It's just that the SLS is already so great that the bar was set almost too high for this car to be better it may have been as good, but to be better than the SLS is a pretty big task. It's kind of like the McLaren F1 versus the P1. The P1 is technically speaking a faster car, but the original F1 is still a remarkable supercar benchmark. Likewise here, the SLS is already so good that it gives the AMG GT a great run for its money. But with those thoughts being out there, how do they actually compare on paper? Well, let's find out. Now, as we always have, there are the first couple of things on the list which don't really have that much consequence at the moment. They will, for sure, when the game comes out, such as the price, but we're just not given that information at the moment. We are told the car class, of course, Group 3, but again, that's just an equal thing between the two, so we'll give them that arbitrary 2 points apiece just for the sake of it. Now, though, is where they can begin to set each other apart. But interestingly, as far as even the engine goes, the similarity between the two cars continues, because although we're not told the exact cubic capacity or cc of the SLS GT3, in real life it has a 6208cc engine, which is exactly the same as the AMG GT. Now, whether or not they're keeping that true to the game, chances are they probably are, they're just not telling us for some random reason. That would indicate that both cars are again equal. So I'm going to give them both a point based on that probable statistic. As far as power though, it's definitely not equal. Both cars are very powerful, in fact they're both among the more powerful of the Group 3 class, but of course the AMG GT wins out because it's the most powerful car of the entire beta, with 638 horsepower even without balance of performance. That's a really good number to be working with. As far as torque as well, it has significantly more, over 50 foot-pounds more in fact. But again, the SLS is by no means bad in that regard. Interestingly though, and this kind of surprises me, the AMG GT is lighter. Now some people may not be surprised by that, but I personally am, because I think it looks like a bigger, bulkier car, and it definitely feels like one. The SLS is sharper, it does not feel as heavy as it is. I would say the SLS even feels like a 1200 kilo car, whereas the AMG GT, I would say, feels more like a 1300 kilo car, which is closer to what it is, 1285. However, the facts are the facts, and the AMG GT is the lighter of the two. Although it's interesting to see that the SLS can also be made lighter than it currently is on Gran Turismo 6. It weighs 1350 kilos on that game. So an interesting comparison there. And finally, of course, as far as horsepower per ton goes, well, it's lighter and significantly more powerful, so of course the AMG GT gets the point with just under 500 horsepower to the 452 of the SLS. So overall the SLS is in some ways better than the rest of the pack, in some ways as good as the rest of the pack, and in some ways not as good. The weight is quite high on the SLS, it's one of the heavier of the class. But it's ironic that both cars do have very significant numbers among the Group 3 category, be it power or even high weight. Overall, the SLS was the quicker of the two, again with me driving, so of course no points will be awarded because there are too many variables involved, but as far as pure points goes, if you negate the arbitrary joint points that they both get, that does mean that in a landslide really, the AMG GT does win by 4 points to 0. But overall, as the lap times prove, they're both amazing cars. If you already like the SLS, you definitely won't be disappointed, and if you're looking forward to the new car, well, its numbers certainly bear out the fact that it's going to be a strong contender. But that's it for this pick overall. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.